Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first of many panels in 2023. We're kicking it off with an all-star panel to end mentoring month. So January, for those who are not aware, January was mentoring month. So we figured what a great way to celebrate and close out mentoring month with the all-star panel of mentors. And we're going to talk a little about mentors, mentees, some myths, truths, have some of our panel share some stories and their thoughts on mentoring, and even talk about some technology that we're using to help with that, and just some other just fun discussions going around. So I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves here. Pete, I'm going to start with you. If you could give your name, a little bit of background, and we'll go around.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining in today. Pete Schramm, founder and CEO of Latitude, employee connection and mentorship software. I love bringing people together. Background, grew up on a farm, built robots for the Army, traveled around the world, played basketball, and now following my heart, my passion of making this topic of mentorship possible for people inside of organizations.
Great, thank you. Nikki?
Hi, I'm Nikki Blacksmith. I am a industrial organizational psychologist. I come from Chicago, and I got my master's at UNC Charlotte. Then I went to DC, got my PhD, and I am now teaching at American University. So kind of went around, but not as exciting of a life as Pete. I teach at American University, as I said, and I also am a CEO of a startup where we work with other startups and we help venture capital firms assess and evaluate and develop their teams within their portfolio companies, really focusing on the people aspect and human capital.
Great. No one's excited as Pete's life. So don't feel bad. None of us can do that. Keisha?
Good afternoon. I'm Keisha Benson Woods. I've been studying multi-generational workforces for over 10 years. Before that, I worked for one of the largest defense contractors in the world and probably the largest cedar contractor in the world. And what I have learned is that more than ever, with 5 generations working side by side in almost every modern work environment, we need to be more engaged. We need employee engagement to improve so that we can improve job satisfaction, organizational commitment, and ultimately get those retention numbers up. So I'm just delighted to be here with all of you.
Thanks so much. Matt?
Hi, everybody. It's great to be with everyone today. My name is Matt Diabas. I am a PhD candidate in organizational behavior and theory at Carnegie Mellon University. I'm coming up to the tail end of my program, which could not be more excited about. Anybody who has been in a long academic program will share the feeling. And I conduct research on collaboration, well-being, the importance of psychological and social health in people's group work. And so the idea of talking about mentoring, advocacy relationships, these types of things that really benefit both parties from a social perspective is really exciting topic for me. So I'm really happy to be here.
Great. Thank you. Dawn?
Hi, everybody. My name is Dawn Lazar-Fradella. I am a Director of Talent Management and Organizational Effectiveness at Broadridge Financial Solutions. I've spent about 20 years of my career focused on talent acquisition, early career programming, talent management, and we've recently embarked on launching a semi-global mentorship program before we go completely global next year. And we're just obviously, with the way the world of work has changed so significantly, to Keisha's point, engagement is extremely important. And we're finding people are really drawn to having that additional support through formalized mentorship programs. And I'm really happy to be here to discuss all of that with you.
Great. Thank you. So I go to my fellow Eagles fan. You'll see his name, Dalian. I always call him Colonel because he's a retired colonel. So I like to refer to him as that. Colonel, please, can you share with us?
Thank you. As Matt said, Dalian Washington, U.S. Air Force retired, just recently retired back in May of 22 after 26 and a half years of active service and total of 33 years military service to include the Army. glad to be on this panel. Mentoring is very important to me. Being an officer in the U.S. military, we are often responsible for large numbers of individuals, personnel coming from all walks of life and backgrounds. So in order to train or develop the next group of leaders, mentoring and coaching is very important. And then like some of the panel members have already said, I see mentoring as an engagement sport. You have to get in it. You have to, in my opinion, have a passion for it to be successful at it. So glad to be here with the panel today and offer a few of the insights that I've learned, at least from the government/military perspective. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And my name is Matt McHale. I am the Chief Revenue Officer at Latitude. And we're very passionate about mentoring because that's a big part of why we have our platform. And what we do is to bring together mentoring and different systems within companies to help them do that, to help them build these relationships. And from a training standpoint, obviously a lot in HR. So I want to go around with the panel now and talk about, some of the importance of these things. And we talked a little bit about some myths and truths, and we'll probably get into some of those as well. But Nikki, I'm gonna pick on you first. So, when you think of mentoring, and again, we can both talk from both a mentor mentee standpoint, because I think that's always important for people, no matter where they are in their career or life, to kind of fill both roles. But when you think of that, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you, and with some of your experience?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that I grew up without any mentors. I went to the University of Iowa. I was the first in my family to go to a 4-year school. I come from a Mexican immigrant family. So I had never been on a college campus until I set foot at the University of Iowa for orientation. And I felt like I was fumbling around in the dark. I just picked things that were interesting to me. I had no real direction. Luckily, I know myself well, so that the path was pretty clear, and I picked things that just made sense for me. But when I was going to, I wanted to go to grad school, I had no idea where I was going to go or what I wanted to do. I'd been kind of experimenting with different avenues of psychology, clinical, social, and they just hadn't felt right. I took a leap of faith and I moved to North Carolina and went to their industrial organizational psychology program and got a master's. It was there that I met my first mentors. I'll give a shout out to Dr. Reeb, Dr. Hegestead, and Dr. Rogelberg. They really, really boosted my confidence. I never thought I would be able to get a PhD. That was just not something that was ever in my mind that I could do. And I was just, I was interested in the topic, but what they really did was ignited a passion and a love for the science, and instilled in me incredible scientific integrity, values. And I've carried those with me. I've passed them on to my students. And so, it just felt like having them in my life really changed the trajectory. I don't know where I would have been without them. And since then, I feel very passionate about mentoring others, especially students who come from similar backgrounds like mine, where, they might not have had as much direction from their, family or network early on. So that's my story.
No, that's great. And you know what, it just made me, we didn't think about that or talk about that. Who was your first mentor? So I'm going to ask the panel that. So think real quick, guys, because you got to come up and answer, and let's give them all shout outs for that. And your story is unique, obviously, because, until you went to college, you weren't on a college campus. So, to have that, from the life you come from to where they were. And obviously those mentors meant a lot to you and kind of bringing you to that. For me, I can go all the way back to having an older brother and my father. Unfortunately, I have buried them both at this point, but I read the same verse from the Bible for me as a Christian. It was from Paul to Timothy, and it was a letter. And I always talk about mentor-mentee relationship, be a Paul and be a Timothy, that they had that relationship. So for me, it's very personal from that standpoint. And I've been blessed to have other mentors throughout my life. But why don't we, Keisha, why don't we start with you? We'll go around. Who was your first mentor, and how did that relationship form?
Yeah, I would say one of my first mentors was Paula Kirchner. She was an administrator at an elementary school in Los Angeles, where I grew up. And I was in college, and she was one of the first professional uh, people that I interacted with on a day-to-day basis. At that point in time, not many of my elders in my family had gone to college. A lot of them have now, completed their degrees, but back then I didn't have a lot of role models close to me. So she made a pretty good impression on, just fundamentals like who you are and how you show up is how people are going to remember you. Keep your word. I mean, just really some basic things that as a young person fumbling through college and trying to figure it all out, like Nikki talked about, you're not always doing things the right way. And so she left a tremendous mark on my life. So.
Hey, Matt,
I think.
I'd like to jump in there if you
Yeah,
don't mind.
please.
Yeah, just from a perspective of mentoring, like the first two panel members said, I'll take it from a professional standpoint, being in the Air Force or the U.S. military, especially being in the officer corps, being like a small percentage, maybe like 5% of the officer corps. So you come into an area that you feel isolated and alone because you're just not knowing and you're trying to figure it out. So I would say my first mentor, not to slight, was my peer, Ivory Carter. We've been knowing each other for over 20 years. Fellow African American, just got selected for a brigadier general, but we literally were figuring out the organization on our own, like stumbling through trying to figure it out, not knowing what we did not know. And that's where mentoring became very passionate for me. And when I had the opportunity as a commander, a senior leader, I had another young African American female that came from an HBCU like myself, only one of maybe 7 junior managers of her own, and she was reclused, just afraid, right? Not knowing what to say. You're really in this foreign operation, this foreign organization, and you just quiet. Unfortunately, her peers took that as being antisocial. What's wrong with her? Don't get along. Just not understanding that from a minority standpoint, whether you're a female, a different culture, or something like that, it's almost like a safety mechanism. You don't want to do the wrong thing. You don't want to screw up. So you just kind of keep to yourself. Or, hey, let's go out to this party, or we're going out to the bar and all that. Like, well, maybe we don't like the same things you like. And it's not that we're being antisocial, just not our thing. But the message from the dominant group, whatever that may be, is sent a negative fashion. But luckily enough, I was more seasoned and I knew what she was going through. So I was able to, kind of tamp that down. And long story short, 15 years later, she's in the top 1% of her peer group, still in the military, what we would call a high performing officer that we could have easily lost in the first 3 to 4 years because, again, not knowing and understanding the difference. And so I would say, once again, Ivory Carter, from a peer to peer standpoint of mentoring each other, figuring out the organization and the secret code, because we've all been in organizations where there's the book and the policy, and there's the unwritten that you got to be in to kind of know and understand. And that's where mentorship has helped me a lot. So I'll pause right there. But thank you again.
No, you know what, and that's great. And it's a great follow-up of Keisha, because I think for both of what you guys shared, there's two things. One, you don't know what you don't know. So when they're in that situation, because you said, oh, it's just the little things that, and just to be reminded of that and have that mentor to say, hey, listen, keep on track and keep doing these things, and just to have somebody to have that accountability to is huge. And as you were saying, Colonel, you kind of knew what they were going through. So the other thing is, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And when someone knows, hey, you went through this and you've gone there, that just makes that relationship as mentor-mentee that much more solid and that much more meaning to people. So, Dawn, can you think of who your first mentor was?
Yes, mine was more on the career side, also a first generation college student. And early on in my career, I worked in higher education. And I was very blessed to have a boss who was, it was in higher ed. So he very much was, a huge advocate for education, but he was the director of student services and a clinical faculty member. Patton, we called him, or Professor Tim Patton. And he really helped me navigate a lot early in my career. And I, to this day, will still call and bounce things off him 20 years later. But so I guess, what he offered to me was an informal situation. He was my boss, but I certainly informal in the sense of not matched with him in any way. And again, he just really helped me find my way. My parents didn't go to college. I wanted to go to grad school, didn't know what I was going to do with myself, but just being able to bounce ideas off of him and get some direction and have that added support was extremely helpful. And I think it definitely contributed to where I am today.
That's awesome, especially that you can still continue to keep in touch to this day and still have that relationship and still can get some advice from the wise sage. Matt, our soon to be PhD. Matt, what do you got? Do you have mentor relationships right now? You're doing, do you remember all the way back to, what was it, like 2 weeks ago when you started college?
I've had many mentorship relationships in my life. Probably the first and biggest impact one was actually in high school. I had an English teacher who named Gary Miles, recently retired, who was just phenomenal. Honestly, probably was one of the biggest influences in terms of, outside my parents, in terms of having a love for learning and really just being curious about the world, being a critical thinker, those types of things. And so it's interesting to hear about, some people talking about, later stage mentorship. But I think, early stage mentorship is really important as well. Developing some of these core skills early on. And hearing everyone's stories actually made me think of two kind of core concepts in organizational behavior that we talk about when we're thinking about people's networks. Because I'm hearing sort of two interesting trends here in terms of, people coming from different environments where, they didn't have access to mentors, or people, joining an environment where they're a minority. And as a result, end up being sort of in the out group of what's going on and sort of the social culture. And the two concepts that come to mind for me are, the first is called homophily. And so that's basically in our networks, we tend to associate with people who share similar characteristics to us. It could be our race, religion, those types of things. And then propinquity, which means that in our network, we tend to connect with people who are just actually close by. So they've done studies in offices and found that just by shifting around where people sit, completely different relationships emerge. People innovate with different departments if they're sitting closer to those departments and offices. And so just something to keep on the mind of, for any listener, whether you are looking to be a mentee or whether you're looking to be a mentor, try to reach outside your close network, because the people who are going to be able to provide you sort of these broad experiences that and really help you develop in an area where it might be outside your comfort zone are going to be people who aren't, necessarily physically close to you and might be quite different from you in a lot of different ways. And so those are just, two things I wanted that I heard as threads through what everyone mentioned.
Sure.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
Matt, you dropped two big expensive words right there. So make sure you put them in the open chat where everybody can grab them. I like them, but I just can't repeat them again, whatever you said. I understand what you said.
Not to do that anymore, because I have no idea what you just said on those. But yes, that would be good.
Understand the concept, though. We understand the concept, but those two big words, I got to use that at my dinner party next. So please drop them out there.
All right, yeah, I'll make sure they get to the chat.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys ever saw the video. So when Matt said that about the high school teacher, because I think a lot of us can talk back about that high school teacher that made an impact. There was a soccer player who was very successful, came back and was looking at the old field at school, and his old teacher walked up from behind him. He's, "Hello, Ian." And the guy turned around and he thought his teacher was dead and just broke down crying. He's like, "I thought you was dead." And he's like, "He thought I was dead." And the old teacher started laughing, but you could just see that relationship that the two of them had. And it's a really cool, try to look up the video if you haven't seen that yet. So, but that kind of reminded me when you were talking about that high school teacher. So Pete, I saved you for last because I want you to not only share your first relationship, but I mean, kick us off to the next topic. I want to kind of talk about where do you think Mentor is going, and talk a little bit about technology and some of those things. But first, share with us your first mentor or an experience you had.
So I'm going to take a slightly different approach. I'll share my first mentor, but I'm going to share how mentors connected all of us here together. And one of the things that's really important for us to realize is it's not one size fits all, right? You could have flyby mentoring, you could have reverse mentoring, you could have your formal traditional mentoring, you could have peer-to-peer mentoring. So that's kind of what I've heard throughout all these different conversations is it's up, down, side to side, and ongoing, right? I met Nikki through a basketball connection down in DC. I met Keisha through somebody else from a barbecue in Virginia, right? Met Dawn from somebody that I met at church because I went to grade school with their kids like 15 years ago. So it's just nuts how all these different circles come together. And to answer your question, Matt, is, where's this going? We love doing all these things, but it's so tricky to accomplish. And a lot of this is by happenstance. What if I wasn't at that barbecue? What if I wasn't playing basketball with that person? What if I wasn't, at church that day, right? All those different things, this wouldn't all be coming together here today. So where is this going is we're adding structure, adding process. And what Matt Davis was just talking about is, hey, how can we be more intentional with those connections? And how can we be more structured with the way that we connect and engage and mentor truly when it's the right time? That's the other piece. It's not always the right time. Nikki, how many times did we, have to reschedule our first coffee date, right? And you're like, hey, there's a lot of things going on. I want to do this. But it can be tricky. So my first mentor, Matt, that I'm going to talk about is Brian. So Brian was somebody that was 8 years my senior whenever I was working at Lockheed Martin. And he'd been in my role before. I was a material cost estimator, so it was not a sexy job by any means. If anybody's familiar with government contracting and the FAR, it's really good at putting you to sleep. But it's what we had to understand, right? Keisha knows what I'm talking about. Colonel Washington knows what I'm talking about here. But it's the piece of learning the process and seeing, hey, you've been here where I was before. And talking with Brian was kind of like, having the answers to a test before I walked into the classroom. Do this, don't do that, and kind of helping get to that next step a little bit faster. He didn't give me, a golden ticket, if you will, but rather a golden opportunity and as a guide, right, through kind of those first very pivotal years, like we heard earlier, right? Those first pivotal years were so impactful.
Oh, I muted my mics. Yep, for sure. No, I love that. And I love the kind of, I think we've already kind of talked or dispelled some of the myths that we had already talked about as far as, age or other things as requirements to have a mentor. So Keisha, I want to kick it over to you. So when we're kind of talking about these things, is there anything specific that you think that when people are looking for a mentor or just around this topic that you think is the most important thing that you really want to share with people as either on the panel or when you talk to people outside of this?
Sure. I think Dalian said it already. Pete said it already. It's the, across, up, down. I in addition to studying multi-generational workers, to be specific, I've been looking at how reverse mentoring can improve employee satisfaction and organizational commitment. And I'm such a big proponent of reverse mentoring because I don't know about you, but in my day-to-day work life, there's so many challenges. And some of our traditional ways of thinking, they don't fix our problems. Sometimes we have to step back and take a different look at things, come at them from a really different way. And reverse mentoring gives us an opportunity to do that. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about, the younger generations, X, Y, and Z. Yes, X is still younger. Mentoring older generations. Those are the traditionalists and the baby boomers. And sometimes when I'm having this conversation, people say traditionalists, they're not in the workplace. In the defense market, it is not uncommon to be in the room with someone who launched a satellite 50 years ago At the same time, you're in the room with someone who's their first day on the job. And just like Pete said, they have no clue what the federal acquisition regulation is. They don't know why they're in this room, which we often call the proposal pit. And what in the world are we doing here? And when can I get out? So 5 generations, this is my reality that I've experienced in my everyday working life. And it really impacts everything from what kind of catering do you order? What is the temperature of the room? How are we going to communicate? Are we going to have virtual tag ups? Do we have to be in person? Are we really going to stand up, or can we sit down? I mean, it goes on and on, but I think be open-minded. I think Pete said there's no one size fits all. But really, there's probably a role for all different types of mentoring relationships in our work lives as well as in our personal lives.
Hey, Matt, can I tag on to that?
Please.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of modify or amplify it, to say, be accessible, right? Let's just from that standpoint right there. Like I said, it can go up, down, left, right, and all that. But in my experience, some of the bigger blocks are the senior individuals being accessible to, and not only just saying, hey, I'm available for mentorship, because again, it's very hard for junior members in whatever organization you're in. You may have that 5% that just outgoing, like Pete, don't mind talking to anybody, don't care, no matter who you are. But the masses, you know what I mean? Hey, I'm gonna stay in my cubby hole. Oh, they go to manager of the bank. They go to the VP of advertising and all that. I really want to know about these things, but I'm afraid to talk to them and things of that nature. But again, if you're that senior member, make sure you're making yourself accessible, and it's not just sending an email or just standing in the room. Hey, if you got a question, come talk to me. Mentorship, in my opinion, is the willingness transfer of valuable information to the success and the continuance, whether that's under the organization, the family, or whatever it is. This information that we have in our head from our life experiences of being on the job 10, 15, 20 years, that again will get lost unless we pass it on. You know what I mean? And I just see mentorship as a way of passing it on. And my biggest pet peeve, if I'm the senior person in the room, it is my responsibility to create that environment where mentorship can happen and be successful. And it's more than just saying, hey, call me if you got a question. So I'll pause right there on that.
Yeah, no.
Do we clap or do we snap? That was pretty deep right there. Yeah, that's good stuff.
I'm passionate about this. I'm passionate.
It's good. That's good. We love passion. So everyone's been doing great. So I don't want to sit here and clap for everyone, but we'll do that at the end. We'll give a clap for everybody. So Dawn, so from what Keisha and Colonel just shared with us, do you think companies or anywhere in the profit, nonprofit, any of those areas, do you think that they embrace mentorship like that, or do you think we need to do a better job of getting the word out to these organizations that they need to embrace mentorship more?
Well, I'm a huge proponent of mentorship. So, the more we can get everyone to embrace it, I think the better. Some companies do better than others. I'm very, very fortunate at Broadridge that we have immense support from senior leadership, not just, oh, yeah, let's do the program, it's great, but truly actively involved in what we're doing, making sure that we're providing the tools and resources necessary for people to be successful in launching a formal program, and also just making those materials available for anyone who might want to embark on informal relationships, because as we've talked about here, a lot of times that's what happens. So just I think getting leadership to understand the importance of it, not just checking the box like, yes, we should have something available, but truly making themselves available to be a part of the process and being a mentor, or in to your point, mentees. We also have a reverse mentoring program that's been very successful. So the more we can get the word out, I think from a leadership perspective, and then also from an early career, because I have that background, I think it starts bringing it all together from there.
Right.
If I can add on there, I think it's also too, like you said, some organizations do it better than others. But again, a structured program, right, is where the challenge is. Because when you say mentoring, everybody kind of understands what it is, but it's one of those soft skills. But how do you deliberately structure it as a program? And me, loving sports, right, I liken it to a sports program. How many programs you got to build the program up? Like, again, Deion Sanders going to the University of Colorado, right? They down in the dirt, ain't won nothing for 20 years. Not expecting them to win next year, right? And you may get some successful wins, but you're expecting to build that program. So any organization that's building a mentoring program, you got to fight through that frustration of seeing instant success overnight. It has to become a part of the culture. How do you build that program with a structure that can be repeatable, reusable? You can copy it, but be okay with, hey, this is a journey and not a sprint. So I think that's the struggle. It's either mentoring is tied to the leader, and if the leader moves on, then the program dies because it wasn't built, or people are frustrated because they're not seeing that instant success right away because it's going to take some time to build that program. So to me, mentoring is a long game, not a short game. Over.
And, yeah, and actually, if I could ask a question, but both to Dalian and sort of broadly. So one of the things that I think was really awesome about the experience that you shared earlier on was that you were able to notice this this woman who was working with you, who you could tell was not being actively excluded, but essentially not being actively included either. And so I'm curious, what are some tips that you can give or actions that that mentors can do, or that maybe could be built into a formal mentorship program to make sure that really promising people like her don't fall through the cracks and get noticed?
That is a great question, right? I got to that point. I'm always one, and most people are, right? We are a product of our experiences. And I knew how I felt for the first 7 to 8 years being in the Air Force, stumbling around, that I made it a purpose on myself that I didn't want anybody else to feel that way, not if I could help it. Correct? So I think some of the things we kind of talked about, making yourself accessible, right? When you're in that leadership position, getting out of your comfort zone, like you said, hanging out or with the people that you're familiar with, and also too, onboarding, right? When you're onboarding new personnel, they're probably going to need the most mentoring right off the gap, right? No matter if they're senior in age or junior, they're going to need that mentoring. So onboarding is a thing that you can do to do that. And once you onboard, also too, be aware, right? You're in an organization. We look around. Great chances are, if again you're in a male-dominated organization and you get 2 or 3 females coming in, I probably think they're probably going to need a mentor, somebody that's that's going to reach out, or vice versa, right? Or culturally, you can kind of see those things, especially as senior leaders. I mean, we all go to these leadership schools, emotional intelligence, and all these things that we're taught and we learn. Is now time to put them into action. So those are 2 of the quick things. Make sure you onboard, right, correctly, and not just, hey, here's the checklist, you figure it out, come back if you got any questions. Think about the first time you onboarded, right? Because most of the time, nobody wants to look, stupid. So even if they got that question in their mind, they're thinking it's stupid, take it off the table for them. Hey, let me show you where the cafeteria is at. Let me show you what's good and bad. So those little things. I think Matt said it, people care when they know you care. So those are some tips for me, but open the floor to others. What do you see, or what are some recommendations you have?
Yeah, I think the word that comes to me for what all you guys have shared is intentional. Not only have something, but be intentional in using it and be intentional of trying to do those things. And I think I want to kick over to you if no one else has anything to add to that, because as Colonel said, you probably talk to the most people here and certainly from around this and talk to a lot of companies. How can companies be more intentional in building these programs and having things where, companies maybe not having the programs and not being intentional with it?
So we're really good at our jobs in most instances. Whenever I'm sick, I go to the doctor. When my tooth hurts, I go to the dentist. whenever I need a mentoring program, I go to the gurus on mentorship and people that have a structured process. Well, it's kind of tough to find those mentoring gurus, right? Hey, who do I call up? Where do I go? Where is the structured process? So that's why Latitude was created. And are there a couple of different solutions? Yeah, of course there are. You find the one that meets your needs. But the thing is, if you don't have that expertise internally and you don't have somebody that's running that program and it's their responsibility, priority 1A, not 1B, 1C, 2, 3, 4, because that's what happens, then it shows, just like Don mentioned earlier, right? We have the senior leadership that are invested in, doing this thing the right way, right? So once we get that leadership buy-in and bottoms up feedback, we want to make sure that we're empowering our people to be part of this solution. It's not just a you shall and then everything's done in a vacuum. So we get that buy-in. We launch the program together, setting the goals and expectations so that people understand the why, the how, the what. And then, what we recommend to start like a pilot, just start with a subset of the people, because let's face it, there's going to be some different curveballs. You might have some issues on the technical side. You might have some transition and you have to get some new people up and running on the process and the system. And then you can launch. So it's not one of these things, Matt, where it's just a snap your fingers or sprinkle some technology on it and you're like, boom, we're good. We got great culture now. No, there's a lot of thought that goes into it. And I'd love to hear Nikki's perspective on like, okay, we're saying a lot of things here and we're talking about a lot of these concepts. Well, what's the difference between talking and doing, right? And some of the things we can think about there.
Well, talking and doing... Oh, that's a big difference. I think, there's a lot of people that say a lot of things. But I think one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet, and that's most important for mentorship, is the relationship. The most successful mentor-mentee pairs, they have a strong relationship. And what underlies that strong relationship are two things. One is trust, and the other is psychological safety. You have to be able to open up and talk about things that, like you might be scared of or nervous, and you can't do that if you don't trust somebody or you don't have that psychological safety. And so I think it is the job of the mentor to build and foster that, safe environment. And that is not, I say that, doing it is another thing, as you mentioned. That is a really, really difficult thing to do. And it takes a long time to build trust. And the length of time varies across individuals. I've worked with individuals who are naturally untrusting of others. And so it takes a really, really long time to kind of build that relationship. So I think, Dawn said it earlier, maybe it was you, Pete, but, having the patience and, these things don't happen overnight. And you really have to be committed and dedicated as a mentor to, build that foundational trust. Because without it, you're just sharing information.
Yeah.
I would say
to piggyback on. I'm sorry
that
Nikki said.
no.
Can I piggyback on what Nikki said about building trust? For me, especially when I'm talking about reverse mentoring, what's the weird thing that we're talking about? The elephant in the room, age. So whenever I start off these talks, the very first thing I say is, we're going to talk about age. I know for centuries we've said, don't talk about age. It's taboo. But you can't get into a discussion about generations without understanding where you fit. We all fit somewhere. And just to try to start that should be, or usually is, my very first thing I talk about, so that we can kind of let down our guard. Don't feel bad about what we're going to talk about in terms of where you might fit, younger or older. A lot of things. I try to use an icebreaker. So my mom is, one of my greatest inspirations. She was an older IT worker, just retired a couple years ago. She's over 70. I won't tell you her specific age, but my sister, younger IT worker, they had the same job. So I have an older and a younger IT worker on my shoulders, and getting the phone calls from them and hearing their perspectives on almost the identical work scenarios was just fascinating. So I had this at my disposal while I was researching on the topic, but you're right. You've got to figure out a way to get that trust built up. And whether it's, a personal anecdotal story, whether it's, just saying and speaking about the elephant in the room. I think, Dalian, you were talking about leaders, being real, meeting people where they are, being transparent, tell stories about yourself so that the person on the other end understands that at the bottom line is that you're a human being. You're a human being, I'm a human being. I have feelings and experiences, you have feelings and experiences. And I think if we can connect at that human level, then that goes a long way to helping us start to build trust.
Yeah, and I think you hit on it, because what I was going to add to that too is, again, authenticity and vulnerability, right? So all those things that circle around the same meaning of trust, and how do you do that? One of the ways I used to do it, especially talking to some of the junior officers, I mean, they coming up on marriage, or I first talk about, hey, how's your finances? I know you're making more money than you made in college. What are you doing with this? Hey, let me tell you think about ways. Here's what I'm doing with my finances, something that you may want to think about. I'm not a licensed financial advisor, so I tell you that up front. And I used to always tell people where my biases are at, right? Hey, I am very passionate about mentoring because that's who I am. I am very passionate about real estate because, again, it's changed my life. So I'm telling you all these great things about it. However, please go out and get other perspectives and all that, and just take mine as a point. Hey, you're 10 years in. The Air Force done moved you around 7 times. You just got a new bride. I know right now you may be thinking about getting out. And guess what? That's okay, right? That's okay if you want to get out and go do something different. This is not the end all be all. So when you create that space that they can truly tell you what they're thinking and feeling, because we've all been there, right? That's what experiences have told us, right? We know how we felt. Oh man, you know what I mean? I don't know if I want to be at this job anymore, right? But at least in the Air Force, that's like blasphemy. What do you mean you don't want to be a part of the team? What do you mean you want to do something different? What do you mean you just jumped in just for college money and now you want to get out and go pursue something different, right? Again, in the Air Force, it used to be with me coming up, that was a taboo. Once people even thought about you were trying to get out, or you were trying to advance or do something different, you became proverbial blackball. We're not going to spend any more time developing or investing in you, even though you got another 2-3 years. We're going to leave you out because you're not being part of that. And you have some companies or organizations to do that. So again, creating that vulnerability, creating that safe space, as we've all matriculated through our careers, we've hit those inflection points when we thought about going left or right. And so sharing some of those stories as well is probably another way to build that trust and let them know that, hey, you're vulnerable as well, and you're human as well.
Yeah, great point. So listen, we're running out of time here. Our time is almost up, so we're coming up on the hour. I want to go around kind of like we did at the beginning, the introductions, but just kind of go around and just kind of give a final thought or something that maybe we did cover or didn't cover as a takeaway to how people could proceed with this. Someone who watched this is going to watch the recording. What's the thing they should take away with that? Take away from this. So. You know what, Matt? I'll start with you, and we'll kind of go around, and I'll end with Pete this time.
All right, sounds good. So actually, I'm going to throw something new into the mix. Actually, something that I think might get to some points that others were making about developing trust and psychological safety between mentors and mentees, and how important that is. One of the things I think people should remember when they're getting into these mentor and mentee relationships is that, oftentimes that will not be the first mentor that person has had. And you will not be the first person that person has mentored. And so the two people that come into that relationship have histories, right? They have prior experiences and maybe, maybe they've had a really bad past mentorship experience or something like that. And so now you have to work through, some baseline lack of trust or some bad, communication behaviors or some things that a person might have developed during that time. And so I think one of the important things during that trust building phase might be sort of getting on the same page in terms of what your past experiences have been like that brought you to that point. To talk about, not just, what are you looking from this relationship, but also, what have past mentorship relationships been like for you, and what worked, what didn't work? How do you want to work with me? Those types of things I think are really important conversations to get to early, to build that sort of foundation of open communication that I think can help trust and psychological safety, some of these things bloom. So I think I love the points that people have been making. Just wanted to throw in that piece.
No, that's great. Yeah, I appreciate it. So, and we do have a little bit of time, so we can comment on these, but I wanted to make sure we did it now so I could get everyone kind of closing there. So, Dawn, any thoughts around what we've talked about or how people can proceed?
I think, one thing is really just leveraging your network, to Pete's point, how he met all of us in such different ways, and you just never know what you can offer to someone else at the same time as being a mentor or being mentored. So leveraging that experience, because we're all here to help one another in different ways, and everyone can benefit in that respect. And then from within the workplace, workplace or professional organizations, if maybe you struggle with putting yourself out there to informally stumble upon a mentor or mentee, sign up within your workplace or professional organizations, because a lot of them do have structured programs that can allow you to get your feet wet in that respect. And who knows where it might take you. Lots of opportunity there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think all of you have covered it. People just don't have to assume like, hey, this is the org chart and my boss is going to be my mentor, or this is the way it has to be, or in the military we have the chain of command and that's it. We talked about your peers can be your mentors. We talked about reverse mentorship, where it could be younger people, could be other people have just gone through things that you haven't gone through yet. So so that's a great point. Look outside of just where you think, oh, this is my little area and this is where I have to find my mentor. And you can have mentors for different things and different roles in life as well. So don't just think like this is one and that's how we're gonna move with it. So
hey, Matt, real quick, I need to highlight Amanda Kazi Cryer, who's commenting on here. And what you just said is not just one, and you have different mentors and mentees at different stages, at different phases, for different purposes. And what Amanda was just putting in the chat, I mean, look at these different rock stars from around the world. I went over and read some of them, and it's like, okay, you have one of those people that's kind of guiding you and supporting you, you're set up for success. And then she just keeps going, boom, 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 boom. You got your own personal board of advisors there, Kazi. That's like, I mean, clearly it shows, right, all the great things that you're doing. But I think that's a great example of everything that we're talking about in action. And if she, kind of messages like, how long did it take to form those relationships? Like, she's very active. Like, you think I'm a networking kind of person, right? She's on steroids, right? So I think just to take that out for a second and say, hey, check this out in action, right? Of what's going on. Back to you, Matt.
No, that's great, and we've had a few commenters, but Amanda, yes, has been burning up the comments and has got really good input. So thank you for that, Amanda. We really appreciate that. So, Colonel, anything we have to close on?
Yeah, what I would say on mentoring, and particularly to those in leadership positions within the organization, whether you're a first line supervisor all the way up to a senior VP, remember, be accessible, right? Be accessible, be vulnerable, be trusting to create that mentoring, that mentoring environment. We as leaders are responsible for the culture, whether we want to believe it or not, and this is the culture that we want, then we have to nurture and develop that culture. So my thing again is to leadership. I see that as the responsibility of creating that culture. So you have to be accessible, trustworthy, and again, vulnerable to create a successful mentoring environment, in my opinion.
Yeah. Absolutely. So there's another clipper you just remind me of. It's a Ricky Gervais movie. I don't know what movie it is, but I see the clip all the time, and someone's talking to him, and they say a society's great when men plant trees that they will never benefit from the shade of those trees. And that's kind of the same thing of what you were saying. So I got to find what movie it is because it seems really cool from the clips I've seen. So, Keisha, anything in the final thoughts?
I was gonna use a page out of Latitude's playbook, but Pete already did it. The board of advisors. I think everybody should take a step back, whether you're considering mentoring or being mentored, and map out who your board of advisors are. Our lives have many facets, and so it's appropriate that you'd have several folks mentoring you on a number of different topics. But if you just plan that out and look at it, you might decide that there's some gaps, areas in your life where you need some guidance, you need some help, you need someone to bounce things off of, and you haven't found that yet, so that you can be focused when you are embarking on your next mentoring journey. And in reverse, you can do the very same thing. Who are you supporting as a mentor? And kind of map that out and look and see what gaps, what areas do you really have expertise, but you're not helping anybody. Those are some areas where you might want to start targeting and looking for your next mentor or protege.
Absolutely. Nikki?
I think I want to end on the importance of praise, recognition, and gratitude for both the mentee and the mentor. I think it's kind of obvious for the mentee. It really, builds their confidence when you can help them recognize what they're doing well and keep them going and encouraging them. But also for the other way around, as a mentee, sometimes you forget that the mentor also is navigating their own career and dealing with challenges. And so I think it's always important to reach out to those who have mentored you in the past and just let them know what a big difference they made and how they really helped you, because that's, I get sometimes students emailing me from like 10 years ago, and they're reminding me of something I taught them in class. And just that little note just is like, oh, this totally remotivated me today or energized me. And so I like to do the same for my mentors. One of them is Dr. Tara Barron. She was my dissertation advisor, and she is now president-elect for the Society of Industrial Organizational Psychology. And I imagine she has her own difficulties. She's in a whole new position. And so she really is someone I look up to. And if she's watching, which she's probably not, because she has a million things to do. Thanks, Tara.
We'll send her the recording. She can watch it later. So, Pete, we talked about the personal board of advisors, and I saw you hold the sheet up. So, for those who don't know, before you share your kind of final thoughts, could you talk a little bit to that? And we have a one sheet on it. So, if you go to golatitude.com or contact us, we could get you that PDF on that. But share with everybody what that is as far as the personal board of advisors.
Thanks, Matt. So the personal board of advisors is a concept that's been talked about for 100 years, but to add some structure to it is something that nobody's really done quite yet. So the Latitude team said, let's do this, right? So think about the couple of mentors you have on your board. Think about your champion, your boss, your sponsor, your ally, your personal accountability partner. And there's more information at the link that I shared there. I gave a TEDx talk about this to the Defense Acquisition University a couple of months ago. But it's this concept of how can we structure all these different people and get some reminders over time of, oh my gosh, Dawn, it's time to chat with your mentor one again. Colonel Washington, it's time to chat with your boss again. Matt, it's time to chat with your champion, your ally, right? Those different people. So, click the link, see if it's something that is of interest to you, right? Again, a way to structure it. We think about, Lean Six Sigma, we think about project management, we think about these other concepts where we have a structured process for it. But whenever it comes with connecting to people and engaging in mentorship, we don't exactly have a fully flushed out process. So this is a starting point on your journey of getting there. So check it out if you're interested. Reach out to us. We get pretty excited about it.
Absolutely. Any other final thoughts from the discussion?
I'd hand it over to Dawn. If Dawn doesn't have anything, I clearly I got something else to say.
No, I can't think of anything in particular to add. So
I did get Dawn, right? Did you have your final?
No, I had given my final thought about just leveraging your network and,
Yes.
Hey, Matt, I do got a final one. Then Pete, you can go. Go Birds! Philadelphia Eagles, baby, let's go.
Go into the Super Bowl. That's why I saw when you brought up the sports, I thought you were going to talk about Coach Sirianni and how they had to rebuild from
like a flower.
Coaches and going
the seed.
Yes,
he planted the seed and it grew into a flower. Now we a lovely garden. Yes, all those things.
Absolutely.
All right.
I'm sorry, Pete.
You do a raise of hands. How many people are Eagles fans on the phone call? In some capacity, 1, 2. Don't you dare put your hand up, Matt Davis. Jeez. All right. So I'm a Steelers fan, and let me make that very clear. So from Western Pennsylvania, the left side of the state, but for the Super Bowl, I will cheer on the Eagles because it is a Pennsylvania team. So go Birds indeed. Back to the mentoring and connection piece. Want to think about internal versus external and coach versus a mentor. I never really knew what a coach was outside of sports, but somebody that you will ultimately pay money to typically, right? And they care about more of your success. I think of it as very tactically and like, we're going to fix this problem, solve this, get through this, a weight loss coach. Maybe it's somebody to work on your jump shot for basketball. Maybe it's somebody to get better and ready for a triathlon. Maybe it's a LinkedIn coach, right? Something like that. So they're going to work on a specific thing. And typically there's an exchange of money. Right. Whereas a mentor, on the other hand, we're thinking more relationally and we're thinking more strategic and more macro level. And I've never paid any of my mentors. So just something to think about, when do you need a coach? When do you need a mentor? When do you need a couple of different coaches and a couple of different mentors along the way? And that gets to the second piece of the comment of internal versus external. We might not find all of our mentors and coaches and mentees and people on our personal board inside of our organization. And I think that's okay, right? It's up to the leadership and the people running the program internally to decide that and determine who's in or out of that program. But, I've always had somebody on my personal board, formally and informally, that have not been at the same company that's paying my paycheck. So just something to think about. And as leaders, we want to make sure that we encourage that openness, and especially whenever we're in those smaller stage, companies. Nikki, you've worked with a bunch of these, right? Many of these people have worked with a bunch of these. How can we, find those right folks? So it goes back to that trust and respect of this foundation. And if we trust our people to do what's right, respect others, and perform with excellence, then they're going to be able to do those things. So hand it back over to you, Matt, with those kind of closing points there.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, and I think there's so many different ways to find and reach out to people now. Technology has done a great job. There's things like Twitter Spaces. I'm on Clubhouse on a regular basis. And there's a lot of good audio platforms like that where you can connect with people, you can build relationships, you can find mentors, you can find people from all sorts of different backgrounds. So, just reach out and do that. If you're a company and you don't have a program or want to get more intentional with it, obviously contact us at Latitude. That's what we do. That's what we're passionate about. And that's why we're here having this conversation today. But lastly, I'd like to thank everybody. I'd like to thank the whole panel for taking the time to not only share your time with us, but share your wisdom and share your thoughts. You're each, very accomplished in your own world, and being able to take it out of that and share with people outside of that. That's why we love technology and love being able to do these type of panels, and we'll continue to do that. We'll have a panel every month moving forward. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see one or more of these people pop up in other panels throughout the year, as much as we'll bother them and they allow to steal a little more time from them. We will do that in the future. So we just want to thank everybody for coming on. If you're watching this live, like Amanda was doing a phenomenal job commenting and bringing things to the table. But if you're watching it later, we hope you get a lot out of it. And as I said, contact us if you have any questions or need any kind of guidance to to moving into a mentor relationship, building these systems, whether it's personally or for your organization, we love to talk to you about it. Matt, did I miss anything? Producer Matt, anything in closing?
I don't think so. Thank you everybody for joining us.
Good. Thanks again, everyone. We'll say goodbye and go Birds.
Go Birds.